First, I just want to let you know, right now I just checked my YouTube account, my channel. I noticed that right now, the number of views for the videos I posted, A2, 9. A2, only nine students watch it. A3, 5. A4, I just posted yesterday, so pretty new. 2 students view it. So I hope those students who have not viewed these videos try to view as soon as possible, because when I post more and more videos, it becomes harder and harder to follow. Another thing is, because we will finish our module 2 today. Module 1. Module 1 part B today. Our first module, 2 parts, part A, part B. So we finish it today, and you will have our first quiz this weekend based on the materials for part A, part B. So please study the videos as soon as possible, and I will post some comprehension questions for part A, part B. Oh, another student coming in. Let me admit him. All right, good. Yeah. All right. Yeah, just let you know, because let me just let you know. I expected to post comprehension questions sometime tomorrow, so you will see them. Then, when you study the videos, try to answer those comprehension questions. At the same time, I will also post answers, because that's for self-study, those questions. All right. After that, this weekend, Saturday morning, I will post our quiz number 1, 10 questions. Okay? You need to complete it by the end of Sunday. All right? Yeah. So that's the, our this week arrangement. Try to follow. Because I worried a little bit, so right now, not many students watch the videos, because we have 20-something students. The whole class, we have 20-something students. So you have to watch those videos. All right? Okay, so let's start part B today, because our part B, it is an independent content, part B. So you do not need to watch part A videos to understand part B. Yeah. So part B, we talk about another important topic, fundamental, the basic topic. All right. All right. Oh, just a minute. There is a very important thing I didn't do. Record my voice. Record my voice. Oh. Yeah. Anyway, oh, another student comes in. All right. Yeah. Okay, so let me just, record voice with this video. All right. All right, so let's start. The topic is HTTP protocol. We need to understand this basic communication protocol so that we can understand our technology servlets JSP technology. All right. Oh, just a minute. All right. Yeah, my remote control. So let me get my remote control work. All right. Still not working. Let me. Not working. All right. This working, but why this not working? Yeah. All right. Let me try. Oh, good. It's working now. All right. Now let me start. First, let's understand HTTP protocol. All right. I do explanations here, the right-hand side. First, what's the meaning of HTTP? That's the full name, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. That's our main communication protocol on internet. Okay. All right. First, let's look at some basic properties. First, it is a request response protocol. We just learned a request response model the last time. Okay. All right. Here, I'd like to give you another communication model. Other than the request response communication model, here, the main model we are using here, right? Yeah. Then we have another one I want to mention about, event-driven model. So that's from the Microsoft.NET technology, event-driven model. All right. For this model, the reason Microsoft used this model because they are good at desktop application development. So they made a lot of tools in desktop applications at the beginning. So they use event-driven model in desktop applications. Yeah. Later, so when web technologies became available in 90s, so Microsoft, they tried to move to the web technology world. So they just took their desktop, all the tools from their desktops, then tried to do some way to transfer to the web application side. So then, so they create this event-driven model. So the typical property of this model is you click buttons because on your web pages, you have many buttons, GUI components, a drop-down list, all those components. You can do interactions. When you click a component, you trigger an event. Then that event, calls the callback function, and the programmer, you can write code. You can write data processing code in that callback function to return processed data. So that model, yeah. So Microsoft did that whole thing very successfully. Yeah. All right, but for our Java, because the Java was developed also in 1990s, created in 1990s. Yeah. And when they create the web technology side, yeah, they start from scratch. Yeah. So they do not have some existing technologies they can use. So they start from scratch. So they use the request response model directly, because that's compatible with HTTP protocol. At that time, HTTP protocol already available. So just, you know, it's a perfect match with the HTTP protocol. All right. But in Java later, there is another technology called JSF, Java Server Faces. This technology borrowed that event-driven model. Event-driven model, yeah, yeah, because that technology was developed very late, yeah, 2000 something, yeah, very late. Yeah. Java Server Faces, this JSF right now still it is used, yeah, but not very popular. Yeah, the community for this technology not very big. Yeah. All right. Second property of the HTTP protocol, stateless. Let me explain the stateless. So you can guess the meaning a little bit. Okay? The meaning is each time a client retrieves a web page, so the client contact the server and get a response, then there is a connection established between client and the server. The client opens a separate connection to the web server. Separate connection. Yeah? So this connection only connects this client and the server. All right. And the server does not automatically maintain contextual information. So any information that connects to this particular client will not be stored in the server side. The server does not store. Oh, the server does not try to identify this client. The server does not try to use some special way to identify this particular client. That's the state information. Yeah. The reason, I can explain. The reason, I will explain quickly. When I talk about stateful, I will explain this reason. Yeah. That's stateless. So HTTP protocol is the stateless protocol. Now let me compare it with stateful situation. Stateful. That means the server needs to store the state information at the server side. Because for some important applications, like online shopping, definitely the server needs to store the client's information, right? In that important situation, right? Then the server needs to do some extra work. Okay? So what kind of extra work? Here, the server needs to use another technology called such as, because you can use cookies or session management, but this session management is the main technology used in this situation. Cookies, yeah, sometimes people use cookies. But for online shopping, session management is the most important technology to use. Later, we will have one whole class to discuss this session management technology. All right, now let me compare stateful and stateless. Why we separate those two things? Why we do not just make HTTP stateful? Then we do not need extra technology, right? The explanation is very straightforward. Because, look at this. Connections need to consume resource, memory resource in server, consume a lot of memory resource in server. If you use the stateful connection, then you need to spend more resource. You Yeah, you need to allocate at the server side, you need to allocate more memory resources. But if you just do the stateless connection, then you can minimize the resource used for the connection. Yeah. So that's the main reason, save resource. Then let's look at from the overall communication between client and server. Most of the time, the server does not need to store the client state information. Most of the time, just request response, that's it. Why you need to store the state information? No. So 90% of the time, no need to store the state information. Only about 10% of the time, server needs to store the state information. So for that consideration, it is more efficient just to make the HTTP protocol stateless. Yeah, so because 90% of the time, works perfect with the minimum resource used at the server side. Then for the remaining 10%, then when you really need to use the state information, you need to do something extra when you write your programs. You need to manually start the session, things like that. Okay? Manually you start session. All right, so after that, when we talk about session management, we will discuss, okay, when we start session. So we will leave later lectures. All right, so this is the stateful stateless. All right, next property, it uses reliable TCP connections by default. The TCP port is 80. Here, let me explain this port concept. Every time you connect to a server, you need to specify a port number. Because on the server machine, the server needs to connect to many other devices in the world. So there are many ports on the server machine. So which port you want to use, you need to specify that port number. Okay? How to specify the port number? Here, let me show you how to specify the port number. Okay? For example, we want to get to a certain point, HTTP : suppose I use Google, for example, .com. All right, then if I specify port, I put a colon after .com. Then the port number, 80, for example, 80. Okay? That means I want to connect to this server using this port, all right? But because the 80 is the default port number, if you just use the port 80, you do not need to specify it. You just ignore it. That's why, based on your experience, every time we visit some website, we never type the port number because we use the default, HTTP default port number, all right? But sometimes people need to use the non-default. For example, for Tomcat, for this class, we will use Tomcat. Tomcat, we cannot use the default because someone else already used that default port number. So we cannot, although we can if we like, yeah. So we use the Tomcat. The standard port number for Tomcat is 8080. Okay? For example, if you want to visit Tomcat, you need to type colon 8080. Okay? Yeah. So let me write the Tomcat case for our class. So how do we visit our Tomcat server? So HTTP : our Tomcat running on our machine. Our machine, we use localhost. So there is a name for our current machine. So that's localhost. After that port number, it's not default, so you put a colon 8080. Okay? That's the way we visit our server. Okay? Yeah. All right, so that's the HTTP properties. Next topic, structure of HTTP request. There are three components for HTTP request. So let me explain these three components. The first component called the request line, the top line, that one line is called the request line. And it contains several pieces of information. The first piece, method. When you send this request, which method do you use? Get method or post method? Get method or post method? Or other methods. Most of the time we use these two methods. But there are some possibilities for other methods as the rare case. Okay? The second piece, URI. When you visit a server, which URI you want to visit, you need to specify that in your HTTP request. Third piece, protocol/version. Yeah. That's the request line information, all right? Component number two, request headers. Headers, yeah. Many headers here, you can see. Yeah. One or more, yeah. Many, yeah. The third component, an optional request body. Optional request body, all right. So the request body, all right, but it is optional. You do not have to provide the request body, okay? Yeah. But why is optional? You can still send your data to the server. So here, let me answer that question. How do we send our data to the server? There are two places you can put your data. The first place, in the URI, you can embed your data in the URI. Yeah. So later we will see that. We have some special way to embed our data in the URI. That's one place to send. The second is this request body. We can put our data in the request body. Okay? These two places. Yeah. But why optional? Let me answer. Because if we can use the URI to send our data already enough, why we need a body? Why we need a request body? We don't need. Yeah. So usually for URI way, we expect to send small amount. Because URI, you cannot put too much data size, limited. Yeah, we talk about that limit. Yeah, but for the request body, there is no limit. We can put a large amount of data there. Yeah. All right, yeah, later we have this discussion more about the data size we can send. Yeah. All right, now another question. Because there are three components inside an HTTP request object. How do we separate those three components? Right? How do we separate those three components? Now I talk about that. First, between a request line, the request line and the request headers, we don't need a separator, right? Because request line is just the first line. After the second line, then it belongs to request headers. You don't need a special separator to separate them. Yeah, so we don't need. But between request line and request body, you need a separator. Otherwise, we don't know which part belongs to request headers, which part request body. So we use a blank line to separate. Yeah. Blank line. Yeah. After you see a blank line, oh, you start a new component. Because this kind of rules will be used. This kind of rule will be used to process the HTTP protocol data, request the data. Although we do not need to process, we as programmers, we do not process. directly. So we will rely on our server to process. The server will process and give us processed result. Yeah. All right. Not working. Yeah. When something happened, not working. All right, so we finish this half. Then, number 3, structure of HTTP response. Also 3 components, similar structure, slightly different. The first, status line. Okay? Status line, also 3 pieces of information. The first one, protocol/version. Second, status code. Yeah. So the response, the status, what's the status of your request? Status code and description. These 3 pieces. Let me show you a simple example. Okay? HTTP protocol/1.1, the version, protocol version, then a space character. Okay? After that, 200 status code and another space to separate, then OK. 200 means success. Okay? There are many codes there. Yeah. So sometimes you see 404, that code, so you need, the page not available. Yeah. So that's the first line of the response. All right. Then second component, also headers. Several lines of headers. Yeah, a lot of information there. Okay. When we need to use them, then we talk about those headers. The third one, a response body. Okay, so this time you do not see optional, right? Parenthesis optional we saw because this time that's the only place you return data in the body. Okay, there is no other place you can return data. Only the body part you can return the data. So it is not optional. So you have to provide, or the server has to provide that component. All right. Similarly, a blank line separates response header and body. So you can see these 2 parts. Yeah. Similar structure, slightly different. All right. That's these 2 topics. Yeah. Any question? Yeah. Hope it is pretty clear. Yeah. All right. Let's move to the next topic. Properties of HTTP request, part 1. Because this is a long list, so I need to divide it into 2 parts, part 1, part 2. These properties are very important. Some of the properties we can use in our programming. All right, so let's look at the property number 1. Oh, before we look at the property, so let's try to understand the HTTP data another time. HTTP request is a text stream. Okay, so expect the main part. Actually, there are 2 parts. The main part, the text content, text stream, okay, with which binary files can be attached. Then there is an optional attachment associated with the main part. Yeah? That attachment can contain the binary data. Then, because you send images, for example, you upload images, right? Things like that. Yeah. And attachment. Yeah. So that structure in the HTTP protocol. Okay. All right. All right. Next, property number 1. A request contains data passed from client. Yeah. So that's nothing, right? All right. So the first one, we know that. All right. Second one, now, the size of the HTTP request line. remember the first line. Especially the URI part. URI part. Because URI part, we can embed data, right? We can store our data in URI. How to store later, I will describe the way to store the data in URI. All right, so you can do it. But the size is limited. The size is limited. Okay? You cannot send too much data, limited. But what do you mean limited? Can you describe that limit, right? Yeah. All right, so yeah. Let me describe that limit. For different servers, that limit could be different. Yeah. It depends on servers. Yeah. But the most commonly used limit, there is a limit size that most servers use. That's 4K. 4K. Most servers use this size, 4K. Okay? You know how large it is 4K, right? Yeah. So that's why the way, so if you feel your data not that much, you can restrict it within 4K, then it's okay. You use URI request line to send. If you feel your data could be more than that, then you have to use the body, request the body. All right. Then for the request body, no limit for the size. No limit. Okay. The only thing is slow. Yeah. Too much data. Because the reason is when the machine sends data, it is divided into pieces, okay? Divided into blocks. So you have large size, but divided into blocks, just keep sending, right? So keep sending, yeah, just takes longer time. So that's why no limit, okay? Keep sending, yeah. Because send in packets. Each packet, the size is fixed. Yeah. All right. Next, probably HTTP 1.1. So currently we use HTTP 1.1. Yeah. Although after so many years, because right now it is still perfect. So that's why people still use 1.1 version, right? Only the host header is required. Host. You need to specify the host header. Yeah. All other headers optional. You have many other headers. The host header required. Yeah. Then the header names. For each header, there is a name for it. So when you retrieve the header information, you need to specify the header name. It's not case sensitive. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. These rules very simple. Yeah. Next one. Most header names appear only once, okay? But only one exception, one language. Language header can appear multiple times. Yeah, let me explain this language header. When you develop a web page, usually you need to specify which language this web page supports. Yeah. By default, English, right? Yeah, English. Yeah. So you do not specify. Yeah. But for some other languages, you need to, put some code there. Yeah, the header part specify which language it should support. So that way, you can specify multiple languages. So that's why that header can be repeated multiple times. For other types of headers, only one, exactly one. Because based on this one or multiple times, it determines which way you use to retrieve, right? One way you just, get header. If multiple, then you need to try to get an array. You need to try to use the way to get an array of values, not just one value, array of values. That's why that tells you how to retrieve the header information. All right, next one. The IP address is in one of the request headers. The IP address of the client. Okay? The client submit request to the server can retrieve the IP address of the client because it is stored in the header. Okay? So then, sometimes your server-side web applications may need to use the IP address information, right? Yeah. So here, there is one header stores it. Yeah. All right. Next, another important useful header called a user-agent. Yeah. Capital, we know, not case sensitive, right? The capital or lowercase mainly for readability, for our own readability. Right? Here you also see, I use different font. So when you see the font like this, that's the original spelling. Okay? Yeah. That's the real name of the header. Okay? Yeah. All right. This header contains information about the user agent from the request. So what kind of information we want to know? So the user agent information we want to know. Okay? So the information about web browser. What browsers do you use? Right? Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer. So from this header, user-agent header, you can get that information. Okay? Mobile phone, so yeah, your own agent types. Operating system, Windows, Mac, right? Yeah, software version, that kind of information we can detect using this header. That's why if we let's recall our previous video. In one video, I talk about doing statistics on the web browsers. Remember, I gave a list of percentage numbers, Chrome 68 point something, right? Things like that. At that time, I asked you how to do that statistics, right? Yeah. And also, I proposed an idea, we may do a project on that, right? Can we do a project? So we just do the statistics by ourselves. How about that, right? So now we move one step closer to do that project. The step is, we know we should use user agent to get that information. After we get information, we can see Chrome here, Firefox there, then we do some simple math, find the percentage number, then we display, right? Yeah. So here you can see that project. We try to get more and more knowledge until we can do that project. All right. Yeah. Any question at this point? Yeah, good. All right. That's part one, properties. Part two, we have some more properties. Okay. Cookies, right? Cookies and the information stored in the request or response headers belong to implicit data. Yeah. Cookies, yeah. Because cookies can be stored in the header parts. Request response, right? Two-way, you need to send cookies both ways, right? You put the cookies in the headers part. There is a special header to store the cookies. Okay? Yeah. That the data stored in the headers, we call implicit data. Implicit. Yeah. Implicit means it does not expose to outside easily. Implicit. Yeah. But there is explicit data. What's explicit data? HTML form data entered by an end user is explicit data. HTML form data. In an HTML page, we can have an HTML form. Inside the form, we can enter several pieces of data. That's the form data. That's explicit. Also, we also know URI data. Remember, we can embed data inside URI. URI data also explicit because it is exposed to outside people. Yeah? So that's explicit. Yeah. Implicit, it does not expose. Okay? So you have to use, internal, secure way, right? Yeah. So usually people cannot see it. It is, important. It should be protected. Yeah. The cookie data, we need to protect the cookie data. Yeah. All right. That's this property. Next property. The referrer header indicates the URI of the referring web pages. So here, the situation is like this. We describe the situation. Okay? Suppose we have page 1. Page 1. Yeah. Inside the page 1, we have one link. Connect to page 2. You send a request to the server, right? But the server wants to know your page 1's URI, right? Yeah. Yeah. Then this referral header can give the server this information. That, yeah. Sometimes it's useful, right? Especially think about the Google engine, right? So the Google engine may want to get this kind of information, right? Referral, yeah. Because the page referring, that's very important relation that Google engine wants to use. So this header can do that. All right. Other than that, let's see. Now the get method. HTTP has several methods. Later, at the end of this lecture, I will show you all the methods. The reason I do not show you now because we do not use them, right? So, but we only use get and post, 2 methods. Among those methods, get method is default. Default means when you do not specify the method. Yeah? You do not specify. You just send your data directly. That means it uses the get method. Post, you have to specify post. Otherwise, it is get method. Okay? So default. Yeah. Next property. When a form with get HTTP method. Remember, in a form, HTML form. I mean, right here. This is HTML form. Okay? You have action, attribute, right? Inside, you put a data processing file name, right? Then method. You also need to specify the method. What method do you specify, right? So get. Capital, lower, doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah. Yeah. Which one you like. So you can send your form using get method or post method. Yeah. You just change here. When you use the get method to submit the form, look at the form data items are appended to the URL as a sequence, as a query string. As a query string. Okay? Let me explain. As a query string. Okay? Yeah, because here you try to visualize it. Yeah? How do you send the data as a query string? Yeah, here, let me point it out. One example. Okay? All right. HTTP, let me write the full URL. Let me use just localhost, okay? Tomcat, localhost. colon, right? 80, colon 8080, yeah, Tomcat port, default Tomcat port, yeah. Not default HTTP port. All right, now web app, okay? Yeah, because you need based, yeah, so this just I show you in the previous video, 8.4, only 2 students watched that, okay? That's why you need to watch 8.4, all right? So the Tomcat, my app, suppose this is our web application name, okay? After that, suppose we have a data processing file URL. We need to create a URL for that processing file name, okay? So here, let me, oh, what's wrong? Let me just call process. How about that? Process. Yeah. All right. Now append the data. Here I show you append data. Okay. Question mark. Start adding your data. Okay. First name. Suppose I use fn equals. Okay. A. Let me just do a short way. Okay. Ampersand separate data pieces. Okay? Last name, ln, equals b. How about that? Okay? This is the way we append our data. So if you use the get method, you will send in this way. Okay? The server URI, all the way to your data process file. After that, question mark, start, append your data. Your data will use name value pair here. First is the name of the data, name of the parameter, equal the value of the parameter. Ampersand, the next piece, name of the parameter, value of the parameter. In that way. Okay? Yeah, later we will look at it again. So here, because at this point, if I do not give you this information, you may feel puzzled. Right? How to send data, how to append data. So here, at this point, I explain, give you this. Later, I will mention this another time. Yeah, just repeat it another time later. All right, so that's this property. Let's look at another property. Yeah. All right. Next property. All right. Next property, post method. Okay. The post method would not display data parameters in the URL, while the get method would display, yeah. The get method, if you look at your browser, you can see the data there. Okay? You can see the data there. Yeah. But the current browser actually hide the data. The current browser, by default, it does not show you, after you submit, it does not show you the URL, the data part. But if you put a mouse click, you click it, you will see. Yeah. You will see. Yeah. Yeah. But it's there. It's in the, search bar. It's there. Yeah. Browser, search bar. Yeah. That's not very secure. Yeah. Think about if you put some sensitive information there, someone else may steal it. Yeah. Yeah. So we will talk about that, how to protect our sensitive information. Yeah. All right. Next. Properties of HTTP responses. In HTTP response, the status line, one or more headers, a blank line, and the actual document must appear in that order. Okay? So here, this page, we will look at the programmings. So here, this list of properties actually helping us when we write a program, because the response, we need to prepare the data for the HTTP response. When we do that, we need to consider these points. All right, the first is the order consideration. Okay? The further consideration, status line, headers, blank line, need to follow that order. But we just know that in Java, we do not need to worry about that order. We can change order, but Java will make the right order for us. Okay? In Java coding, when we put those pieces of information, we just put them. When we need to put, we just put there. But in the server will, before the server sends the response, it will use that order, follow that order. Otherwise, the receiver side cannot understand the content of the response. Yeah. All right, but we do not need to enforce this order by ourselves. Yeah. Number two, when servlets sends HTTP responses back to client, it is legal to set status code after setting headers. This is just what I talk about. Yeah. Because you as a Java programmer, we develop servlets. The servlet, that's the Java programs we write to process the server side data and return the responses. Okay? So that's what we are doing. Yeah. All right. But when we write our program, it is legal to set the status code after setting headers. The reason is obvious. The server, before the server sends it, it will adjust the order for you, for us. Okay? So if we do random order, no problem. The server will help us to make the right order, then send it back. Yeah. So that's the one point. Yeah. Another point. Yeah. Now this time, the servlets buffer. Yeah. So here, this concept, the buffer concept. The servlets buffer the HTTP response headers and send them all at once. So let me explain this all at once thing. Networking communication. So here, in order to explain this property, I need to go back to the networking communication a little bit. In networking communication between client and server, people send data through packets, right? Packets. Yeah? Each packet very certain size. Yeah? Because for long data, large size data, it is very hard to put it in one packet. One packet size, very limited. So you have to break your long data into multiple packets. After you send to the other side need to put those packets together, then, do the remaining work. So that's the networking data sending way. All right, so here, but this header part is important. We know the response header. Header part is important. We don't want to split our headers in several different packets, right? Otherwise, the receiving side, when you get headers from one packet, do you want to search for other packets to get them? No, it's not efficient, right? So the receiver side likes to retrieve all the headers in one packet. So it can do the right way processing immediately, save a lot of time. Otherwise, sometimes you need to wait for other packets, not efficient. So this rule, this property, tells that for all the response headers must be placed in one buffer. Yeah? The buffer size corresponds to that packet, right? Put in that one buffer, okay? And send it out containing all the headers. Next property. A servlet does not have to buffer the whole document and send it to the client at once. Yeah. For the document, not the header, the body, the document we put in a body. When you put the document in a body, then if it's too long, it can be divided into several blocks. Each block corresponds to one buffer, one packet. Okay? Yeah. So don't worry. So yeah, break into many packets. Yeah. So the buffer is used many times, right? Yeah. The buffer, the first time you send the first block, second block, and so on. Okay. Use that buffer. Send block by block. The receiver side needs to put them together. Then display the document as a whole document. So that procedure. So you can see this background actually helps our programming. Think about, you need this background when you write your Java programs. Otherwise, it is very hard to make your plan. If you don't have this background, it's very hard to make a good plan. All right. You must set the content type before transmitting the actual document. Set content type. So here, this is content type. In the response, the content type is important. What is the content type of your return data? Okay? Is it HTTP? No. Is it not HTTP, HTML/text? Yeah, that's the common type, the content type. Or is it PDF? Right? Is it image? Yeah. Image. Oh, very sensitive. Right? Is it Excel? Right? So you need to tell the client side what content the server returns. So the client side will select the right program to display your content. So the Excel, it will bring the Microsoft, Excel, to display. Image, so it will use the, image software, default image display software to display. So the content type is important. So that's why you need to set the content type before transmitting the actual document. So that order, when you write your servlet, you need to pay attention to that. So set content type, okay? Then write your data. Okay? All right. So that's this property. Next, HTTP response header names are not similar to the HTTP request. This is straightforward. Then let me explain HTTP method other than get and post. Okay? Just let you know, there are some other methods. We do not use them. You just know they exist. Head, trace, put, delete, options, connect. Okay? There are several others. But later, when you learn the advanced Java technology, this is the basic. After this, there is another one, advanced. Then you will use more method, put method and delete method. So when you go to the advanced level, you will use 4 HTTP methods. Okay? Others still we don't use. We don't use. Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So that's this topic. Then our last topic of today situations for using post instead of get. Now, at the end, we need to determine when we write our programs, we need to make this decision. Should we use the post method or the get method? Okay, yeah. So we need to make that decision. All right. First, we know the total amount of characters in a get is really limited. That's the one I said, because it's in the URI. That's the top line, right? That size is limited. The most commonly used size is 4K. Okay? Yeah, so that constraint you need to consider, all right? Yeah. So that means if you need to send more data, you have to use the post method. Second, the data you send with the get is appended to the URL up in the browser bar, so whatever you send is exposed. This tells you the sensitive information should not be sent using the get method. Okay? Credit card number, social security number, bank account, you know, that kind of sensitive information, use post method to send. Do not use, never use get method to send. Yeah. So the second point tells you that. Third one, because of number 2 point above, the user can't bookmark. Yeah. All right, so here now, let's talk about the bookmark situation. Bookmark a form submission if you use post instead of get. All right. This point, let's compare the difference between post and get. Yeah. For get, everything is displayed in the URL bar part, yeah, URL. Yeah. So you can do the bookmark. If you bookmark it, if you allow your user to bookmark it, the user can recover the same page. The user does not lose anything, okay? The user does not lose anything. But if you send the data using the post method, many data pieces are hidden. Many data pieces are not displayed in the URL bar. That means your users cannot bookmark that page, right? The user cannot bookmark page because some data pieces are missing. If they bookmark that page, they cannot recover the original page. Okay, so that situation tells the difference using get and the post. Here, we can use one simple example. For example, suppose you visit some education website. You have a lot of study materials, many pages. So then when you study, you go to some particular page, oh, you find some information, very important. Yeah. So you want to come back to study sometime later. Yeah, so you like to bookmark it. So when you do the bookmark, some critical pieces of information should be stored in the URL part, like which book you want to study, the book ID number, right? Then the chapter number, which chapter you want to go, and the section number, then the page number, right? All those pieces of information should be explicitly embedded in the URL string. You bookmark it, so everything is there, right? So next time when you come back, you recall, so you display, go to that URL, you go to exactly the same point. Okay? Yeah. But think about if you use the post way, you cannot do that. Post way, yeah, you cannot recover. So you as a programmer in that situation, you should use get method. Okay? Because you write the code, right? You write the code. You choose which method to use. Okay? Yeah. So this tells you some considerations regarding get and post. Yeah. All right. Next topic, sending parameters in a get request. Yeah. I explained before, yeah, but here let me just let's try to see another time. Yeah. In a get request, parameters, if there are any, yeah, you do not have to send parameter, right? It's optional. Yeah. You send a request without parameter, that's okay, right? That's optional. Yeah. But sometimes you need to send the data using the get method. Yeah. Appended to the first part of the request URL, starting with the question mark. Then parameters are separated with ampersand. Yeah, just as I show you. Okay, just as I show you. Yeah. All right. So here, let's look at the way we send the data, right? How do you send the data? Yeah, here, at this point, yeah, because we have a few minutes, let me explain a few ways we can send the data using this get method. The first way, we can use hyperlink. Hyperlink way to send data. Okay? Yeah. So remember, we can create using a tag, href, right? Hyperlink, href, double quotes. Then we put our link. Okay? Yeah. So http://localhost. So here I'll just use the Tomcat setting 8080 slash, all right, okay, my app slash process, okay, I still use the, process, okay, all right, process is the processing file URL, okay, file URL, okay. Then I need to send the data question mark, okay, first name fn equals a, ampersand ln equals b, double quotes, okay? Then, the remaining part of the tag, okay? That is one way to send the data, okay? So you put a hyperlink, okay? So you put a hyperlink, then the user click this link, then this data is sent to the server, okay? You don't need to type, okay? Yeah, because you don't want your user to type things like this. Okay? Yeah. This is one simple way to send it using hyperlink. That easy. Okay? All right. Another way, yeah. So here, this is our number one way to send. Okay? Number two way to send in JavaScript functions. Okay? Yeah. We write JavaScript functions. Okay? In our JavaScript functions, we can send. Yeah. Yeah. So we have several ways to send. Right? Yeah. So I'll show you later. Yeah. Number two, JavaScript functions. Then number three, so let me show you number three way to send. Okay? Number three. Very slow. Yeah. All right, number three, HTML form way. HTML form way. Okay? All right. Yeah. So you have form, okay? Action. Okay? Suppose here I put a process. All right. The file, we want to process the data. So action is process. Method is get. Okay. All right. Form. All right. Then input. Remember, input field. Input. Okay. Name attribute. Our parameter name fn. How about that? The first name fn here. Okay. Value equals a. All right. Another input field, name, parameter name, ln, value, b. Then last submit button, okay? Also input element, type, submit. Okay, yeah, submit, right. Value, submit. All right, then end. Right? After that, so there's a form where you put your data in the form. Then in the page, you just click submit button. Click. Then it will send the data. Send the data using that URL way I just showed you before, right? Yeah. So you can see, these are the common ways we use to send the data. All right? Yeah. All right, so that's the pretty much everything we need today, yeah, for our part B. Okay. Yeah. So the last one here, just